Welcome into the Lucas and Lucas podcast. Lucas Frankel alongside Mike Lucas. Mike, the Brooklyn Nets just got swept in the postseason, but there's good news, Mike. There is great news to report. Ben Simmons is progressing toward a return. They are expecting him some point in the next couple weeks, barring any setbacks, to play for the Brooklyn Nets. Again, they were swept in the first round, but Ben Simmons is nearing a return. So on that front, very positive news.
Well, listen, as we have learned in the last minute and a half, anything is possible. Now, I'm not going to spoil the surprise that Frankel has for you guys later on the show, but Lucas Frankel has blossomed. You see that glow in his face? That's not a glow that we've seen before, and there's a reason for that. But let's just say that Vegas had the odds of Ben Simmons returning to the court before this next set option was higher, and Frankel beat the odds. Ben Simmons didn't. Frankel's a warrior. Ben Simmons, I think he chickened out. Honestly, I really think he chickened out. We heard the report today that he has a mental block, that he's legitimately scared to play basketball. And I don't know how much I believe it. And you have to be sensitive to the mental health issues. And I believe there's something there. But for that to come out at the exact time it did after the report saying he'd be ready to go in game 4, they lose game 3. I don't really know what to believe besides the fact that in totality of this series, Frank, the Nets played poorly, and the Celtics are really, really, really good. And it was a terrible matchup on paper, and I overlooked that, thinking that the greatness of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving could overcome it, and simply they could not. They couldn't play well together in the same game, and Boston found ways, and give Boston credit. I think the one thing, and I'll let you go after this, I think the one thing is you could look at the Nets and say, yeah, disappointing. You know, KD didn't play well, Kyrie didn't play well, they couldn't defend, they couldn't rebound. Yeah, that is all true. But that's taking away credit from the Boston Celtics, who played a fantastic series on both ends of the court. And they look poised to make a deep, deep run in this playoffs. And defensively, they're one of the best defensive teams that I've watched play in about a decade. They're that good.
I mean, let's start with the Celtics here. I mean, they are absolutely loaded in every conceivable way. Jason Tatum is playing the best basketball of his life. For my money, he's a top 5 player in the league. He can do it all. He can score from any angle, anywhere on the court, driving the basket, fadeaways, threes, mid-range jumpers. He can do everything on offense. He is one of the most complete offensive players in the game. It's Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, Tatum. And I honestly, Tatum right now is better than Durant, just straight up. Durant cannot drive to the basket and make things happen. And that's the difference right there. Tatum can, I think that was ultimately one of the differences in this series, was that, you know, Kevin Durant's not hitting jump shots. He really doesn't have a second avenue to go to. And for Tatum, if he's not hitting jump shots, he can just drive to the basket.
For one sec, I heard Richard Jefferson say this on the broadcast, and I didn't notice it until he said it. Durant didn't go right at all this series. When he drove, he only drove left, and when he went right, it was always a one-dribble pull-up. And I'm not sure if that's scouting or if his knee flared up or if there was an injury aspect to that. But once Boston figured that out in game 3, they just funneled him left into the rest of the defense, and he made some tough shots later in the series, but go back and watch, Frank. It was unbelievable to see how predictable he was. And that's why I think he struggled to get past the Al Horfords, the Daniel Tice.
Yeah.
They knew he wasn't going right. It's much easier to guard a guy who's quicker and longer than you when you can funnel him directionally. And they were able to do that. So I hope that we find out that Durant's knee was tweaked or something, which would explain that tendency. But it was a great point by Richard Jefferson I hadn't noticed. And when you go back and watch, it's evident, clear as day.
Yeah, I mean, Durant, I mean, hopefully he was hurt because listen, during the regular season, he was, listen, you want to talk MVP all you want. I mean, Jokic is going to win it. Giannis is obviously extremely valuable, but during this regular season, just look at the Nets when Kevin Durant played and when Kevin Durant didn't play. When he played, if he played the whole year, they were going to get the 1 seed.
Yeah.
No bones about it. They were the 1 seed, but he missed, 6 weeks. They went 8-23 during that span and fell all the way to 7 and almost missed the playoffs. And that's basically what it came down to. So in terms of actual quote unquote value, I think that's where Durant sort of separated himself in that regard. But as for the Celtics and the East, they have a clear path to the finals. Let's go team by team here. Nets are gone. Heat, Lowry, and Butler are both hurt. Who knows, what their status is going to be going forward. Obviously, they could say all positive things, but fact of the matter is they're both hurt right now. The Bucks don't have Chris Middleton. He suffered the same injury Kevin Durant had. That cost him 6 weeks. So who knows how long it's going to take for Chris Middleton to come back. So there's the next round. It's Bucks. It's going to be Bucks Celtics because Chicago's, couldn't be more depleted. They're going to lose in this game. And so you got no Chris Middleton. Huh?
You got Embiid with a thumb.
And Embiid needs some thumb surgery, and who knows if the Sixers are going to win that series. So you look at the landscape of the East. This is all shaping up for Boston Celtics to, at the very least, go to the NBA Finals. I can't say that they're going to beat a Suns team that has Devin Booker back. We're seeing that he might come back for the next game, if not that Game 7. And the Warriors are obviously the sexy pick right now with Jordan Poole playing out of his mind, and Curry and Clay and Draymond all like being the quote unquote like death lineup in the league. So in terms of the East, I don't see how any team right now is more complete and more ready to win the conference than the Celtics. To me, it's not even close. Like, they are fully loaded.
You want to talk about a good team? The Celtics are good enough to not be jinxed by Lucas Frankel on Twitter when he goes all in. When he starts hashtagging all about 18, hashtag sweep.
Tried everything.
99 out of 100 times, that is a jinx against whatever team that he's trying to jinx. And they were jinx proof. They were that good. They were jinx proof. And I think, Udoka, Ime being a former Nets assistant, familiar with the Nets and their tendencies, he completely outcoached Steve Nash. And I think, I'm not ready to fire Nash. I think this has been a season from hell. But I do think there are some shortcomings in his offensive philosophy. He wants these guys to move the ball, but there was no movement whatsoever in that series. It was ISO after ISO after ISO. And as far as the Nets roster makeup.
Hang on. Let's get to the roster makeup in a second.
Okay.
This was a master class of coaching by Ime Udoka in every conceivable. He completely outclassed Nash in every single fashion in the game. The whole philosophy of playing defense on Durant, he was not prepared for. The whole, Nick Claxton free throw thing, completely exploited. I feel like Udoka like knew this, obviously being a Nets assistant, that, going to practice, seeing these guys play on a day in, day out basis. He knew that Nick Claxton was a terrible free throw shooter. No one exploited it during the regular season. And who would know better about Nick Claxton being a crap free throw shooter than, a guy who went to every single practice last year, Ime Udoka. And it's crazy the fact that you look at the Nets assistants last year, and that's coaching staff, I should say. Nash, D'Antoni, Udoka. Nash is the third best coach on that staff. Steve Nash is, listen, and people can make whatever defenses you want for Steve Nash, whatever excuses you want, vaccine mandates, Durant injury, however you want to describe James Harden. I'm not sure what the best word is, but dealing with James Harden. And the reality is, Mike, during the series, there was no offense. It was, here, Kevin, here's ball, make play. Here, Kyrie, here's ball, make play. That's not an NBA offense. The Celtics and the Celtics role players were incredible in the series. Every time Grant Williams was in the corner, he hit the three. They never missed one of those open threes that, like, if they would have just missed one of those, the game turns. But Marcus Smart played out of his mind, Grant Williams played out of his mind, and it just seemed like they were clicking in every conceivable fashion.
And that's why I think you have to give the Celtics more credit than the Nets negative here, because the Celtics played that well. I don't think they could have played any of the other 15 teams in the postseason. The way Boston played in that series, they crushed everybody. And that is a testament to that franchise, to that team, the roster construction. I mean, completely exposing the Nets in terms of size on the wings. I mean, the Nets are throwing out 3-point guard lineups with Goran Dragic at 6'4" being their biggest guard at times, when the Celtics' smallest guard is 6'5", and Marcus Smart isn't a small 6'5", he's a yoked 6. It was a terrible matchup. Boston played and executed almost to perfection. And when you add that on top of the fact that Kevin Durant struggled and Kyrie Irving outside of game 1 was not particularly good. And although they made threes, they took a lot of long twos and missed, and they missed free throws. Nick Claxton was terrible. Like, it was the ultimate combination of everything going wrong. But I think it starts with Boston being that good. Like, I just think they played that well. And one last thing on Nash. Yeah, excuses. How nice would it be if Udoka was the coach of the Nets right now? Like, he was right there. And I know that's not fair to say, but you got to want, like, the Nets played no defense. Would they have played defense for a guy like Udoka? Is that a Nash thing, or is that a players thing?
I mean, the one thing that I was concerned about when I heard that Udoka was leaving before last season, obviously, to take the Celtics job, was that he was the quote-unquote James Harden whisperer. He was the guy who, believe what you want to believe, that, was able to relate to James Harden, get the best out of James Harden. Like, no other coach on the Nets was able to remotely come close to doing that. And then, obviously, you see what he's done with this Celtics team, getting Jason Tatum to play at levels he's never played before, getting Marcus Smart to win Defensive Player of the Year and to buy in like that. Like, guys who, in the past have, Jason Tatum's, like, gone invisible for stretches. And Marcus Smart has, been, the Celtics wanted to, trade him, end the experiment. But Udoka goes in there and he gets these guys to buy in and these guys to, play to the best abilities. And that's all you want in a coach is to guys who maximize talents on rosters. And that's exactly what Udoka does. And for me, Nash doesn't do it. And what sucks about it, Mike, is that, listen, Kevin Durant, I've expressed my love for Kevin Durant more times on this podcast than that probably for any other player since we've been doing the podcast. I love Kevin Durant. The fact that he has made the Nets relevant, it's been, one of the happiest times of my life. But Mike, his loyalty to Kyrie Irving and his loyalty to Steve Nash, and you heard it in his post-game comments, it's baffling. Why is he so bad at choosing people he wants to associate himself with? It's like he's like not like ruining his career because he's already got 2 championships. He's already got 2 MVPs. But man, you're Kevin Durant. You could align yourself with like any star in the league, and you chose Kyrie Irving. Why? It makes no sense.
I'm gonna take Bill Simmons' take here because I think it's the right one. I think KD loves basketball, and he's okay with all the other chaos that comes with it. He may be annoyed by it, but at the end of the day, he's a basketball junkie. And Kyrie Irving's just a baller in that sense. And do I agree? No. Is that how I think if I were Kevin Durant? No. But we've seen through his social media posts, through his tweets today, his comments back and forth with the TNT crew, KD thinks in his own mind and marches to the beat of his own drum. And he really doesn't give a damn what anyone else thinks, whether he wins another championship or not. And him and Kyrie, when they're on the court together, they have a special kind of connection that I think as a player you dream of having with a star teammate, even if it doesn't necessarily equate to being the most successful duo possible. I'm trying to think of another example, but like Dwayne and LeBron back in Miami, like their skill sets kind of overlap. They weren't perfect complements to each other in that regard, but they love to play with each other and they found a way to make it work. Now, it's not apples to apples, but sometimes you just find a guy you love playing with, and Durant, for whatever reason, and I don't know, loves Kyrie Irving. Frank, I'm going to turn my lights up real quick, so take it for a sec.
I mean, you can't compare it to D-Wade and LeBron. Those were the 2 best players in the league at that time. That is preposterous. There's no comparison to Kevin Durant choosing to play with Kyrie than, LeBron teaming up with D-Wade. Those guys were the players in the league at that time. And Kyrie Irving, listen, he's a gifted scorer, but it's pretty much he can't play defense. Has had had the flat earth reputation before that. Had the killing the locker room cancer tag around him too. So and D-Wade and LeBron, I don't know. Those guys were Hall of Famers, champions before they align. I don't know.
Durant and Kyrie.
I don't know. Either way. Man.
It wasn't the best example. I get it, but I'm just saying there are some guys who you love. I mean, listen, I love podcasting with you. I do. But I could choose to podcast with anyone, Frank. And I keep coming back to you for some reason because we have an innate chemistry that goes beyond the mic, Sometimes you find someone you like hanging out with and doing what you find someone you like to work with. And I feel like that's the relationship between KD and Kyrie.
So Kyrie had 39 points in game 1. He had 46 the rest of the series. I don't know how I feel about Kyrie. He's going to be back because he loves Brooklyn. He loves Durant and him love each other. So we'll run it back. And it is what it is at this point. But either way, so this was the second year of the whole, Durant, Kyrie experience. They've won 1 playoff series. Mike, how much of a failure was this? Do you consider it a failure? How do you sort of view this whole? Because you texted me, and I was so mad at you that day. That I believe it was July 30th, 2019, the day that Durant and Kyrie chose to come to Brooklyn. You said this was like the greatest day of my life. So it's been almost 3 years since that moment that you texted me that. I was so angry in the moment. How do you feel about that statement right now?
I'm just disappointed. I mean, I think the Nets are the best team in the league last year, and barring a couple crazy injuries, they easily. You asked me. Let me answer the question.
The Nets had a championship last year.
Let me answer the question. I'm disappointed. I thought last year they should have won the NBA championship. I thought this year, heading into the season, they were talented enough to compete for the NBA championship. I did not foresee James Harden falling off a cliff like that. I did not foresee them trading James Harden midseason. I did not foresee them getting a guy in return like Ben Simmons who would not contribute for the remainder of the season. And I definitely did not see them getting swept out of the first round as a 7 seed to Boston. So I'm disappointed. I don't think it's a failure yet because KD and Kyrie are still there. And I think the roster next year will look significantly different than the roster this year.
Sorry. I have to stop you there.
Yes.
All right, so
they have 5 guys on contract.
Will Ben Simmons be on the Nets next season, yes or no?
Yes.
All right, so then if you have Ben Simmons, then here's what the lineup's going to be. Because
you add Joe Harris.
So it's going to be Ben Simmons, Joe Harris, Seth Curry, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. That's your 5. And then probably Patty Mills, I assume, is going to pick up his player option. And then you'll have, Cam Thomas, Kessler Edwards. Those are 8 guys right there. And then you have a couple more spots to fill like on mid-levels or whatnot. But that's going to be the roster. You said drastic changes. What could you possibly mean by drastic changes?
Let's see. You upgrade a 6'3" Dragic to a 6'10" Ben Simmons who can actually defend guys on the wing.
All right, hang on. But that's not significant. That's not
the NBA in 3-point shooting 2 of the last 3 years, who's also 6'5" and a better defender than anyone they were throwing out there. It'll take the pressure off Kyrie and KD to facilitate every offensive set because you have a guy out there like Ben Simmons who all he wants to do is pass the ball.
So you're operating the assumption. I mean, I think there's a chance, Mike, number one, that this whole Game 4 debacle thing with Ben Simmons might have cost him a spot. Like, he might not play for the Nets ever.
And if that's the case, then I get it. But I think I don't believe Ben Simmons won't play again. I'm under the impression that Ben Simmons will come back, and at some point they're gonna have to slap him in the back and say, "Hey,
no, do not slap him in the back."
You're right.
Terrible idea.
My bad. Good catch. You have to sit him down and talk to him nicely and tell him that, we learned Ben Simmons wants his money. And there's no way he's going to get paid for another season if he doesn't play. He got a lot of money this year from the Sixers, despite the fact that he never stepped on the court. The Nets will not pay him a dime if he doesn't get back on the court. So if Ben Simmons wants his money, Ben Simmons is going to have to play. That's why I believe he'll be on the court next year for the Brooklyn Nets.
It's so hard. I mean, it's literally impossible because I haven't spoken to him. So I don't really know what's going on. It's really weird. I feel like if they were up 2-1 or, it was like a 2-2 series, maybe won a game 5, maybe he comes back. But I feel like once it went to 3-0 to just have him play one game, I feel like, Rich Paul and whoever makes those decisions were just like, listen, he's just not going to play. But that's what I like to believe. But then the more stuff starts to leak out. It seems like the Nets were really ticked off that he didn't play in the series, which makes me believe that relationship might be fractured. But going back to this whole season, Mike, it started off like I guess we didn't know this at the time how bad it started off, but the whole James Harden being out of shape, that was the first red flag, and has never really gotten in shape because he had a couple of good games this year, but that was pretty much it. And then he
had those 3 games when he went to Philly and was like,
no, he had a couple games with the Nets. He had a game against. He had like a 28-point first half against the Knicks.
He had a triple-double on Christmas. I mean, I'm saying his best stretch was those 3 games when he got traded to Philadelphia where he said, I'm not going to the strip club for a week. This is what's going to happen. And then I'm going back to the strip clubs, and he's not the same player. He's just not.
Either way. So then you obviously got that whole James Harden not being in shape thing, which, and just having the shortest, just had no patience for anything anymore. Did not see that coming. Because last year, he was so invested and bought in so much that, like I said, James Harden, for as long as I live until the Nets win a championship, which probably will never happen, will be my favorite. The 2021 version of James Harden, the one that played for the Nets from January until May, is my favorite NBA player of all time. That 4-month stretch, there was not an NBA player I have enjoyed more watching and had more fun watching than that version of James Harden. But for whatever reason, he decided he didn't want to be there. And obviously the whole Kyrie Irving vaccine mandate stuff, which in reality, Mike, that really put a huge damper on the season. And when you look back at history of why did the Nets not win a championship this year with this team, because Kyrie Irving refused to get vaccinated. And there's really not much anyone can say to convince me otherwise. So Kyrie Irving single-handedly cost the Nets this season. And then after that, Durant missing 6 weeks was an absolute dagger. It just hasn't added up. It's like the Kawhi Paul George tandem in this trio or a duo is just it's like they're cursed. I mean, it really feels like both sides are just cursed, and it's never gonna happen.
Look at, and I wish I had thought of this before and I had the research on it, but look at the quote unquote super teams that have been formed in free agency over the last couple of years. You got the Nets, who have been plagued by injuries, haven't won anything. You have Kawhi and Paul George, haven't done anything, missed this whole season.
But that's pretty much it, though.
You have AD and LeBron, who won the bubble.
They won a championship.
But that was, hold on. That was in the bubble.
It's still a championship. So
I agree. No, I agree. But I'm saying outside of that one bubble stretch has been a massive disappointment, and that overshadows everything else. I get it. The championship overshadows everything else. But they missed the playoffs this year. Prior to the bubble, they were not clicking on all cylinders.
But listen, they got their championship. It worked.
I agree.
There's no other argument.
I agree. But I'm saying in a traditional year, if that doesn't work, then we're looking at this totally different. And they won, so it doesn't matter. But these teams who have given up all these assets.
2 teams, Mike. You're naming 2 teams.
Three. First of all,
but the Lakers won. You can't include the Lakers in this conversation.
But what about the Heat?
The Heat won 2 championships. It worked for them.
You mean trading for Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry?
The Heat are not a super team. You cannot put them in the same category as the Clippers.
I'm just saying the teams who have made these big investments to bring in guys instead of.
Hang on, no. Hang on, no. Your point is off base. The teams that have done this are the Heat in the early 2010s with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. The Nets with this clash of play. The Nets twice tried it. And it failed both times. And more on that in a second. Clippers with Kawhi and Paul George. And that's pretty much, and in terms of, super teams, that's pretty much it.
What about the
Lakers?
Gary Payton and Karl Malone?
Yeah, but that wasn't a new super team.
Steve Nash, Kobe, Dwight Howard. That's not a super team?
No one.
James Harden, Chris Paul. I mean, I'm just saying, the teams that have won, and honestly, Milwaukee traded for Drew Holiday. And
there's no science to this, Mike. Teams.
I'm just saying that we as fans, you see it, and you're like, this is going to work. How's it not going to work? And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't work more.
No, listen to me. Here are the super teams. All right. It's the Clippers with Kawhi and Paul George. It's the Nets who tried it with the KG, Joe Johnson, Derrick Williams, Paul Pierce. And it's the Nets with the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. It's to me, it's.
Wait, you're forgetting a big one.
The Lakers with
Julius Randle, Taj Gibson, and Derrick Rose.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. But those are the super teams, and however you want to define how champion and whatnot, it's literally impossible. But in terms of obviously growing a team, doing what the Celtics have done, doing it organically, shafting teams in trades, I guess is maybe the best way to do it. And also the Bucks, who got arguably the most talented player of our generation with the 16th pick in the draft. Absolutely absurd. But going back to the next year, as bad as these 2 years, I still have hope. If Ben Simmons can come back and be Ben Simmons, the All NBA, All Defense caliber player, and you throw him with Joe Harris, one of the best 3-point shooters in the game, Seth Curry, one of the highest percentage 3-point shooters in the game, Kevin Durant, one of the greatest players of all time, and Kyrie Irving, assuming he doesn't derail the team again and refuse to play, that's an I can't wait to see that unit together. But Mike, it's not going to happen because it's just our luck. My teams, any team I root for besides the Yankees, but even the Yankees are cursed now. It's can't catch a break with any team. It's ridiculous, and it makes me really question why I root for anybody.
Make a note. One of these podcasts coming up, we should play a game. Why is Kyrie Irving going to miss half the season next year? And think of the most ridiculous things we could come up with, the stances he could take that would force him to miss half the season. I want that in the future podcast.
Producer. I don't know. All right.
But I agree. Listen, I'm still optimistic. And I do think adding a little more size to the wing, I think Kessler Edwards is going to be a pretty good player. They got to figure out the center position. But if Kevin Durant's on my team, I'm going to believe. And maybe that's the wrong philosophy to have, but that's the philosophy I'm going to die with.
So the whole...
You look defeated,
Mike. It was so exciting. I really thought that after we lost to the Bucks in Game 7 last year, and the memories of that, I have such a good memory. And Mike, it's honestly obviously having a great memory is good and bad, but I so vividly remember watching that game, and I vividly remember James Harden hitting a step back fadeaway 3 that banked in to put him up 101-96 with 3 minutes and 54 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. And then the Bucks and then right after that, Milton hit a 3 to cut it to 2. And I'll never forget, Marv Albert calling Durant's shot at the buzzer a 3 and being like, oh my God, that really just happened, but knowing it didn't happen, and then going to overtime. Bruce Brown scoring the first basket of overtime, and then that's not scoring a single basket, I don't believe, again until the Bucks had the game in hand. Like these moments and these memories are just, they're so painful and they're so entrenched in my mind that I will never, ever, ever forget them because, like you said before, the last year's Nets team was going to win the championship. And then they were going to win it this year too. But they just couldn't stay together. And it's so sad. And because we could have won a title. We could have won a title, but
should have won a title.
But
and still can win a title.
But the optimist in me is that like there's still, it could still work. Like Durant's not done yet. Kyrie's got more to give. Ben Simmons, if he can play, and like there's still juice left in the tank. There's still gasoline left in the tank. Like this could work. It's just a matter of Ben Simmons actually playing and things going according to plan. But we'll see. I just really want, if the Sixers got lost to the Raptors in this series, Mike, that would almost not like make up for it, but that might make up for it. Like seeing James Harden, because I would love this has to go to Game 7, just so I can see James Harden just absolutely crumble. Because that he's just gonna he'll be on the bench with a towel over his head, and it's gonna be glorious, Mike. I've been waiting for this moment since the day of the trade.
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well. I had a thought, and now I don't remember what it was, but yeah, I mean, the one thing I want to see from Nash, I forget what I'm going to say. It'll come to me. Put a ball. I'll come back to this.
So the Sixers were up 3-0 and Embiid hurt his thumb, and the Raptors responded with 2 straight wins. Fred VanVleet missed the last game, and it's crazy because Bill Simmons is obviously way more into the analytics of who's on the court, who's off the court, but apparently the Raptors are a better team without Fred VanVleet. Apparently, their defensive rating, they give up 130 points.
He can't play defense
for 60 minutes when Fred VanVleet is out there. But when he's not there, they're like this elite defensive unit. They can just throw all these bodies at Harden. And you're seeing, Joel Embiid can't use his right hand. I mean, not that I've seen a ton of that series because I just haven't been truly invested in it because they play every game has been the same time as the net game. So I haven't really truly seen what how Embiid looks or whatnot, but clearly he's not putting up those 40 and 18 games. It's more like 20 and 12, which the Sixers are going to need a lot more out of him if they're really going to win the series. But if the Sixers at the whole, I know, and listen, this isn't a dig on Eli or anything, but just to see Harden and Doc Rivers lose, Mike, would make the season for me.
Yeah, I would love to see Harden lose, but I'm rooting for the Sixers because if they lose and Doc gets fired, my boy may need a new job. So selfishly, I'm hoping.
All right, NFL draft Thursday night. Jets at 4-10. I don't want the Jets to trade for Deebo Samuel because I don't believe they're ready to win now. Yeah. And Deebo, I don't know how long. I believe he has 2 to 4 elite years left, and I don't know if the Jets are going to be a legitimate contender during that time.
They better be. That's when Zach Wilson's rookie contract ends. So if there was a time to trade for him, you do it now. I agree. If I'm the Jets, I don't do it. But I think if there was a time to trade for an elite receiver, it is now with Wilson in the second year of his deal. So,
Mike, if you had the number 1 overall pick, who would you take if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars? It seems like this dude Trayvon Walker, who I never heard of. And listen, he was on Georgia. They were in the national championship game. The guys you heard on Georgia were Kobe Dean, Jordan Davis. Were basically the top 2 guys in that defense. I'd never heard of Trayvon Walker, but now he's gone from 20 to 1 to minus 260 to be the first overall pick in the draft. Absolutely absurd. It just feels like a very underwhelming pick.
I would be terrified. I would not touch him with a 10-foot pole at number 1. Nothing against him. He's an athletic freak, but he has 9.5 career sacks in 3 seasons at Georgia. 9.5. That's it. Their production, I know you want the skills and how they translate and potential, but we've seen so many super athletes. I mean, just look at Al Davis and the Raiders drafting those guys year after year after year. They just never pan out. I would go with Hutchinson. I just think he's safer. He may not have the ceiling that Walker does, but I think at the worst case, he's going to be a solid 10-year player in the league, 8, however long defensive end plays. I think he's good. I don't think he's a great number 1 pick, but I think he's good. That's where I would go. And if you don't do that, I would take an offensive tackle.
What is the best avenue for the Giants in your mind to go at 5-7?
I would love 2 linemen. Honestly, I would like 2 linemen. One on the offensive,
really?
One on the defensive end. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Not 2 offensive linemen.
No. One offensive lineman, 1 defensive lineman. The trenches. have to get better. But if Sauce Gardner is on the board at 5, I think I take him. Or if he's at 7, you absolutely take him. But he'd be the one guy outside of an offensive defensive lineman that I would want in those spots. But I think the strength of this draft is in the trenches, and that's where the Giants still need help. So I would be, upset if they went a different direction.
All right, that will do it for this edition of the Lucas.
Wait, no. Frankel, we teased it at the beginning of the show. But, and I don't know if you want to make the announcement here. If not, I'll shut up. But after knowing you for 8 years now, 7 years now.
Mike, we met in 2011. It's 2022.
I've known you 11 years? Oh, I was thinking when we graduated. I was like, yeah, I've known you 11 years. Frank, we've been waiting for the moment to announce on the podcast that you're going bald.
There you go.
I don't know if you really want to say it or not, so I'll shut up. A great podcast.
No, I met a very nice girl, and we got a good thing going.
There you go. Will she be making a podcast appearance anytime soon?
To be determined. She really doesn't know too much about sports.
That's the best kind of podcast guest for us. The best kind of podcast guest. We're gonna end the podcast, and you're gonna go get your lady friend. I want to have a chat. I want to make sure she's taking care of my Frank.
See you all next week as we discuss the return of Ben Simmons to the Brooklyn Nets. Roll call.